All right.
4:15, I'm gonna call the meeting to order. We are short quorum as it sits right now. So what we are gonna do is we're still gonna address the land use bylaw, which was a key purpose of this meeting. We believe we may have another, council or, committee member on the way. If that does happen, we will reconvene the meeting in a formal format so that we can adopt the agenda and the minutes and the rules now. So I'm telling you all this for nothing, just to stall a couple more minutes. Good day, sir.
Thank you, and good day to you.
I'll wait till you sit. There. Okay. So now for our forum, so we're gonna revert back to our original agenda. Is there any additions or deletions from this agenda? Pretty basic. Seeing not. Can I have a motion to adopt the agenda as presented, please?
Motion to adopt.
All in favor? Carried. The minutes from the January 14th meeting were presented. Are there any issues with these minutes? Been noting any needed corrections or changes? Anybody else have any comments on the minutes? If not, I'll take the motion to adopt as presented.
Motion to which?
Adopt the minutes. Done. So all in favor? Carried. No business on the agenda, so we will jump right into the new business, which is the review of the land use bylaw draft review. And I will turn that over to administration to lead us through that discussion.
Yes. Hi, thanks everyone for coming and spending this time to go over the bylaw together. So this is a draft. It was presented to council on February 3rd. We're doing public engagement right now, trying to raise awareness, highlight key changes, get some feedback. We've got a survey that's open until March 7th. And hoping to update the draft based on the feedback that we receive and bring it to the council for first reading in April. That's the goal timeline. We'll see how we go. So yeah, this is a major overhaul of the document. So we definitely want MPC's feedback. I don't want to just rehash the presentation that I gave to council. I'd like us to actually spend some time going through it. So I just want to highlight a couple of key things about the structure, and then maybe we can, I think, take our chair's recommendation to start by looking at the definitions so that we are familiarizing ourselves with what the words mean in the bylaw, what their meaning is for this document. But just in terms of the overall structure, there's no big surprises, I think, in part one in terms of the structure of the document. Probably the most crucial part of part one is the section on development permit or development permit exemption. So when a development permit is not required, that's a pretty substantive section with some pretty substantive updates to it. So we definitely would like to go through that. Other than that, a lot of this is fairly consistent with what is in our current bylaw and also just generally with what's in the Municipal Government Act. Part two is the overlays and land use districts. So today in our bylaw, we do have an overlay sort of for the downtown. It's not structured in the same way, but we do have regulations related to our Main Street overlay. We have pulled out some other sections of our current bylaw and put them in overlays because they are really regulations that apply to a very specific geographic area of town. So there's now 5 overlays. Main Street, which deals with development along Main Street and sets some specific requirements. The Lower West Peace overlay, which prohibits basements in Lower West because of the groundwater issues. A proximity to rail overlay that basically applies to any land that's within a certain distance from the rail line. And gives us the authority to consider issues related to proximity with rail. The river adjacent lands overlay, which is pulling out from the current R1D district regulations or limitations related to the being adjacent to the river for developments primarily in Shaftesbury Estates neighborhood. And the historical significance overlay, which currently applies to one property that is historically designated by bylaw in our current, or by a different bylaw. And we did have some regulations around historic in our current bylaw, but if you actually read them, it was very, very hard to understand how we would implement. So we have put it into an overlay and also tweaked what that is actually giving us authority to do. Then we've got our land use districts, where we have tried to streamline the number of districts. Really, the main way we're doing that is that we are collapsing a lot of residential districts into the R1 district. Our approach to commercial districts is basically the same because we have 5 today and we would still have 5 different districts tomorrow. Same with industrial. Our community development district now is pulled apart into an institutional recreational district and a natural environment district. So institutional recreational is meant for those primarily public lands, whether they're provincial, town, etc., that have community amenities on them, like our schools, our multiplex, our parks and playgrounds, that sort of thing. The natural environment district is intended for those lands that we don't expect to develop. You never know. I mean, there are a few things within that district that are listed that we can allow or propose to allow, but like public utilities, those have to go sometimes where they just have to go. But it's intended to be the district for lands that probably won't get developed primarily because they are hills or other environmentally significant areas. And then what is currently Ag Urban Reserve is now called Future Development District, just kind of with the intention of relabeling it to make it clear that these are the lands where we're not sure what the plan is yet, but we're an urban municipality, we expect and are open to growth in those areas. And then we have a direct control district, which we currently have today. For the rest of the bylaw, we've got our general land use regs, so we have those today. We have added, tweaked these, so there is some substantive changes in here that I think provide us with better direction. Some of the key ones in there, I think landscaping and screening is probably one of the bigger ones where we've added a lot of new substance. And then specific land use regulations, so that applies to specific uses. And then we've pulled out, we've got a section dedicated to signs and a section dedicated to parking. And I don't think there are drastic changes in the signage section, but hopefully we've made it clearer and simpler, more enforceable. And within the parking regulations, we've definitely got a couple of key strategic changes that I definitely would appreciate feedback on. And then we get to the administrative section. I don't think there's anything too crazy in there, except for we should definitely have a discussion around the development permit processes and especially notifications, because that's some of the process changes that we've been considering. And then on enforcement, I just do want to highlight that we have, if you look at the enforcement and the fines, we have raised those rates that are established in the bylaw, partly just to acknowledge the amount of work that goes into land use bylaw enforcement. If we're forced into that position, we don't do it lightly, but we also don't want to spend a lot of money and have no compensation to the town for that. And then we get into the definitions. One of the key things is that this bylaw, every single use that is listed in the bylaw also has a definition that goes with it. Could not say that about our previous bylaw. So there were some where we had to do our best to interpret what does this use encompass, which is a bit of a challenge, especially when use is the one thing that the MPC and none of the development authorities have any discretionary power over. That is, council sets the uses and we abide by them. So those are some of the big things. And then one of the other key big changes in this bylaw is that within each district, for all of the discretionary uses, there is the table, the assessment criteria table. So we're trying to give ourselves both us as the development officers and the MPC some more direction about what, when we're dealing with a discretionary use, what are the impacts that we actually care about, that we want to turn our minds to. It could mean asking for more information, or it could just be thinking about that issue in relation to that specific use. So within each district, there's a table that says all of the discretionary uses and then all of the different types of impacts, which ones are we thinking about for that? And then in the back, there are schedules that give more information about those assessment criteria. So that's a big change. There's not a lot of municipalities that are doing that. Lesser Slave River, which is a county just close to Slave Lake, they've been working with a bylaw like that that's organized in that similar way for a couple of years now.
So I guess in that regard, I have one question. You've got a lot of little X's on various things that are relating to what? That doesn't mean you can't look at other things.
It gives us some direction. So, I mean, if there's a good rationale for looking at something else, I think that we could. But generally speaking, we're trying to focus on what are the planning considerations related to that use.
Right.
But also making sure that we've gotten those right is absolutely a conversation that I'd like to have.
I guess that's one of the key things about this whole document is those little X's you've got. And a lot of them are the same because they carry through all the different regions.
Yeah.
But there's specifics, I think, depending on a function or whatever, that you could certainly add some, I think.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if we want to go through every one of those things and say, yeah, no, you need an X here or here or here. But so I don't know how we address that. We can assume that those things are right unless somebody's got some glaring concerns with some. And then see how they play out. It's just that I'm afraid that if I'm a developer somewhere and I look at that little chart and it says, say that I got to address the sound impact. I don't go spend any money on it and I don't do it. But what if there is a concern with it, or administration decides after the fact that, yeah, we do need that. And you still go back to that developer and say, yeah, it wasn't in our little guide here, but we want that, so go get it.
After that, sorry.
Well, not after the fact, but in the process.
Yeah.
You still are available to amend those requests, I guess, in the process, right?
Hopefully we don't do that very often. Like we'd like to be
So
sticking
you
to the
want
bylaw. Yeah.
Well, again, it's the chart, it's a support of the bylaw.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily a conflict with the way it's written or the intent. It's, and that chart is advice to you and to the applicant on what you should be looking at.
Yes.
The key things you should be looking at. Doesn't mean you shouldn't look at other things, right? Is the point I'm trying to make.
Okay. So you're concerned about
My
it constraining
concern
us
is
too
that-
much?
Well, my concern is that if that little box isn't ticked,
Mhm.
some guy's gonna come by and say, well, you told me I didn't have to look at that.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
if that is the intent, then we're gonna have to literally go through each one of those and make sure that we've got them right.
Mhm.
If there is still some leeway to ask for further information.
Yeah.
Then it's not as critical.
Okay.
That's the point of mine.
I think the way that I'm gonna go look at to double check, but I'm pretty sure the way it's drafted right now, it's a pretty it's not giving us a lot of leeway. So if we wanted to add a little leeway, especially because this is a new approach, we could, although that does, I guess, dilute the intention of providing certainty.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then we gotta make sure we got the right stuff in there, that's all.
Was this done in-house or did you have consultants somewhere?
Both.
Because
So
when you say I've got to check, that suggests I don't know who you're checking with, but you're checking something with somebody or somewhere.
So we We did contract to V3, who's a planning consulting,
Yeah,
planning and engineering consulting firm.
I assumed that, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, and they did help. So, I mean, people who've been on the MPC for a while will know we've been working on this draft for quite a while. So we did have a draft document. And I essentially handed that draft over to them and said, help me bring this home, because I just didn't have the capacity to do that and do all of the other things that were on my plate at the same time. So they did work on the draft. I have reviewed it a couple of times and made some changes as well. So it's definitely a tag team. Like I've been a big part of the process, but they have also definitely helped.
You're
Push it
still on
through.
retainer then.
Pardon?
They're still working for you.
Well, they are,
They're
although,
available.
I mean, they will help to finish it, finalize it once we've got an adopted document, but the bulk of their work is complete at this point.
Isn't meant as a criticism.
Yeah.
It's meant as constructive. It would have been nice if you'd have highlighted these areas that you highlighted when we started,
Mhm.
rather than looking at the whole damn book. It would have been nice if we felt. Yeah, it's not meant as criticism.
I could think of a whole bunch of improvements to the process that I would do if we had more time and, yeah, for sure.
John, had a question, comment?
I'm not even sure how to simplify the question that I think, questions that are gonna come up.
Mhm.
I think we're gonna fall into a couple of categories. What increased responsibilities are being placed on people in simple terms?
Mhm.
You know, because you're gonna list 5,000 of them, it's gonna be difficult. But what increased responsibilities are gonna be placed on a person working on the house that they didn't have before?
Mhm.
Or what changes to lessen responsibilities, if any, compared to what they didn't have before? And I'm not saying that any of them are right or wrong or indifferent. I'm not making a judgment call on them, but and changes in process, because essentially, if there's gonna be a development, there has to be a development permit.
Mhm.
And a repair falls into a development. Repair of a building, does that include a roof? And you are like replacing the shingles?
Mhm.
Does it or doesn't it? You know, this kind of thing, I don't know the answer to that. You know, what are the kind of like, for example, I'm gonna have my car worked on, I have to keep it mechanically sound, but I don't have to get a permit to put on tires. Because they're known to wear out and need replacing. So questions can come along and say, why do I need the permit to do standard maintenance?
Mhm.
Which would fall under, I wanna put new eaves troughs up. Well, that's a repair. Do I need a permit? Do I have to pay $25 to you so I can go do what I should do to my house?
Yeah, no, so.
You know, and I don't know the answers to those things, but those are the kinds of things that I think. Basically, coming to it from a point like everybody else, I don't know anything about it that much, other than looking through the bylaws. What are the benefits to the new bylaw? What are the kind of the detriments? What are the increased responsibilities you're lessening? I don't, am I asking it okay?
Mhm.
Okay,
Sorry, and are you suggesting, are you asking for a response right now? Or are you suggesting that that's information that we should be getting out there?
I don't think it's necessary right at the moment.
Yeah.
I certainly don't need the answer to those questions on a personal level, but. I think that there are questions that developers are going to be asking is. What constitutes a change and what was the logic behind the change? Other than. You know, one question I got asked by a developer was. If these things are covered by the safety codes. Why do they have to be in here also? Why isn't the province enforcing their codes?
Mhm.
Why do I have to go through 3 different levels to get the enforcement of somebody else's code?
Is there something in here that's
Huh?
like, is there stuff in here that's safety code related?
Well, a lot of it refers to the code or whatever. So again, I don't know what, I'm not even sure quite what they're asking,
Mhm.
but when they come to me and ask me those questions, then, and I don't know the answer to them. I know those questions are gonna come up at
Mhm.
some point, and I think they're. if they're asking, there's a reason why they're asking those things. I don't necessarily even know the reason behind it.
Mhm.
But, because I don't get involved, what I say is it's going through, it's in a draft form, you don't have your feedback, whatever. But these are some of the questions that I've had from people.
Mhm.
Personally, I'm not gonna build a house. Or put up an apartment.
I mean, so just really quickly, renovations are something that is exempt from requiring a development permit. If you're fixing your roof, putting eaves on your building, that doesn't need a development permit. And that's an exemption that exists today, and
I'm sorry?
it exists now, and it will continue to exist.
Okay.
That hasn't
As an
changed.
exemption.
Yeah, as an exemption, like it is, if you look at the broad definition of development, that's in the MGA, and then
Right.
we pull over, yeah, you could call that development, but that's one of the things that's always been exempt from requiring a development permit.
Okay.
In terms of the different processes, I mean, I think that when someone's coming to you and saying, why is there 3 different processes, that sounds like a circumstance where they went and they want to do something in an area where the land use bylaw doesn't allow it, and so they
Right.
need a change to the land use bylaw. And then once you have that change, then you still do need to apply for your development permit. And then
Right,
if you're doing something that requires a building permit, you need to get your building permit.
right,
And I
Okay.
mean, ultimately, the building permit is speaking to the Safety Codes Act and the requirement that is set by the province that we administer.
right.
The development permit is what's addressing the requirements of the town under the land use bylaw.
Okay.
Bit of an aside, I can't understand why a developer would be asking a counselor for advice on these sorts of things. And I can't understand why a counselor would be giving advice.
I don't give advice.
Well, I couldn't understand if you would, but don't you just refer them to the developer, the development officer?
There are
And you're
times.
not expected to.
Well, I agree with you.
Counselor.
I get your point.
Yeah.
But I also
Not
see
meant to
that
be
in
implied.
counselor, people ask us all kinds of stuff all the time about everything.
Yeah,
And they want us to pass the message on because it's convenient for them, so. That's all. I mean, that's not really probably a great answer, but. Usually when people bring something to me, a question they have, I'm willing to pass it on, doesn't really matter.
Are there any other general things that we want to try and tackle here? If not, I think we should try and move this along.
So we want to start with the definition section. I do want to highlight the changes on slide 4 because I think clarifies and simplifies things when we're talking about what's a residential use, what's a commercial use, etc. We have split the definition section into residential uses, commercial uses, industrial uses, accessory, and public uses. And then there's and other uses, sorry. And then we get into general definitions that are just terms in the bylaw that are specifically listed use. So that is how it's separated, and then that's also how the summary table that's in the same section as the district and overlays are organized. So you can see at a glance all of the different residential uses that are listed. All the commercial, all the industrial, etc. So I don't know, Terry, since you were going through and kind of, are there any specific
Again,
definitions?
I guess my question is, what level do we want to go through this? Because, I mean, I've got grammatical corrections, I've got, repetitive corrections. I mean, that's not necessarily, impacting the intent of.
Yeah,
the
send those to me,
definition.
yeah,
They're all in my notes here, you can have it when I'm done, you can
Yes.
clean that up.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna raise a bunch of those here.
Mhm.
There's a couple, things, I guess, and I'll probably just start at the front and work our way through the back, and then section 17 terms and, just the use definitions. And if anybody else has any that they've recognized in the process, please jump in there. Your definitions again, and I'm
you
gonna.
refer to page number.
I'm right now on page 193. 193.
Thank you.
I'm gonna fall back on our manufactured home and modular home thing. And I think you should definitely have a more concise difference between those two somewhere.
Okay.
Now, you know, the whole difference is that your manufactured home has a firm, one-piece frame that the thing is built on. And modular home sits on the foundation, and that's the key difference between those two things. They're both created off-site, and they're both intended to be put together on-site. It's just how and where they're put together that differentiates. So I know for myself personally, over the years, that's been a sticking point, just to try and differentiate that, and I know a lot of people just don't get the difference.
Mhm.
So somewhere clearly that should be stated.
Okay.
Because you know, even when I go to your manufactured homes, you know, and it says modular homes don't apply. You know, you specifically say that in there.
Yeah.
But then the question is, well, what the hell's the difference and why doesn't that apply?
Mhm.
Right? So that's a note. On your child, okay, next page on 193. Oh, sorry, I'm back to 193. Under manufactured home park.
Mhm.
Long-term, right, the last part of that statement for Bearland condominium, is there a definition for a Bearland condominium somewhere? We didn't see it, doesn't mean I didn't miss it, but. I'm not sure what that is referring to.
It is not defined, no.
And do we need a definition or do we need to use something else that describes that?
I'm not sure if we need a definition. That is the right term, so
And what does it refer to?
Fairland condominium is essentially. Like you know what a condominium is when
Yes,
it's in a building,
yes.
so it's essentially a version of that where it's land-based, so everybody has their own lot that is subdivided or
Okay,
condominiumized. And then
but there's no development on it as such.
no, there may be development on the lot, there may or may not, but the lots exist, and then there's communal property. So you could
Right.
have a private road that is part of the
Right,
communal property, and it's controlled and cared for by the condo corporation in the same way that the condo building would be cared for by a condo corporation. So you can create Bearland condominium subdivisions. And it's a different type of ownership structure than,
so do we need a definition for it? If you're gonna reference it
Yeah.
here.
Okay.
I would appreciate it.
Probably defined in condominium legislation.
Oh, it probably is, but
probably will refer to that legislation.
Hmm.
We would refer to that legislation
Right.
in the definition, yeah.
so I'm on the next page, 194, child care facility.
Mhm.
And you got, this does not include home-based child care intended to provide temporary care up to 6. So that would fall under home-based business minor then? Yeah, so that's why it's not covered under.
Yeah, essentially the way the bylaw is drafted, we would not be requiring development permits for a day home of 6 kids or less.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, under establishment brewery, winery and distillery on the next page, 195.
Mhm.
Use where alcoholic beverage is manufactured, packaged and served on site. Does it have to be served on site?
No, it should be an or.
Right, thank you. Similar on professional office. Means development provides professional management, administration, consulting and financial services. They have to provide some
Yeah, or. Yeah.
thank you. I'm on page 199 now, under light industrial. light industrial, the second part there, after the first, series of clauses, says creates no adverse impact, et cetera, et cetera. The activities and uses are carried on within an enclosed building.
Mm,
But
Right, and then
it
it's talking
says
about outside
immediately
storage.
above it there. No impacts beyond the boundaries of the site with associated with emissions contained traffic. And then right underneath it, it said outdoor storage does not impact.
Yeah.
So your activity is indoors, but you can have outdoor storage? Is that, like, I'm missing the point of that. Is the storage supposed to be indoors with that? And if it is, why does it say outdoor storage?
Yeah,
It's
no,
kind
I
of
see the
contradictory
inconsistency.
there.
Yeah. I think, I mean, looking at the light industrial that we have in town, we're not gonna limit and have no outdoor storage, so.
I shouldn't say that.
Agreed.
Live work unit, on page 200.
Mhm.
Again, I'm probably just ignorant to the fact, but can you explain that to me? Does not include home-based business. Working space may be used for retail sales, personal services, or studio space for. So how is that not a home-based business?
Would that be like Renaissance?
It's,
There's
I've seen
Yeah.
it more, like I've seen these buildings quite a bit in like Calgary and Edmonton now, and essentially it's been a development that's been constructed with access to the general public
Yeah.
into the space, right? But then you've got, it's like the actual, how it's structured. The people operating the business might not actually be the people that are in the dwelling above. So therefore, it's not a home-based business, but you've basically got a unit stacked up the front of to optimize your, so it'd be like if I built a house on Main Street.
Yeah.
Right, but I obviously want to, get something out of having a house on Main Street. So I would put a storefront down below. Maybe at some point I operate it myself, but then I rent it out. Well, it's still a live work, or it might be my office down below, right? And I've got, say, I'm someone like Investors Group, I'm Dave, I live upstairs in a unit and my whole office is downstairs. And my clients come in and that sort of thing. So it's a specifically for that sort of arrangement. I don't know of anything a lot of the houses or buildings on Main Street would now probably fall into that classification because we do have a lot of smaller buildings that you could renovate the entire upstairs into your full 2,000 square foot home.
Yeah.
And then your downstairs would be your live work. You might have a garage out the back or something.
Okay.
But that's where I'm seeing that.
It's also,
Correction, or-
the other difference is where we're putting it, so that that is the type of use where you're putting it more in your transitional commercial and commercial spaces, not.
Yeah.
That's not a use that's being listed in the residential areas of town, yeah.
Okay.
But it is also a concept that's new to us.
Yeah, it's been around for
Yeah.
forever. I mean, like, used to be able to,
like Renaissance, great example.
I was trying to think of where is that? What is the one with, but that's a great example. Yeah, it's like, there's the business on the front end of, that's basically a live work. That's
Right.
exactly what that is, but that setup predates probably the bylaws,
Thank you.
so. So, or the leather shop that used to be out back behind,
Yeah.
same thing, right?
Is that
So
where they sold dope from? At the same level, right?
Live meeting.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Somebody suggested that I haven't been on the planning commission long, but have been in the dope business for years.
Page 201, public utilities, there's just something's not clear in that first statement, I'm not sure if you missed something. Means development for public or private utility infrastructure purposes, which are to the development, which are supportive of the development, which are necessary for the development. Something's not worded right there. I'm not sure.
We will take another look at that, yeah.
You read this very carefully, Philip.
I tried to.
Yeah, there was a few things that I struck across too, where it was kind of like, hey, this isn't really making sense here. And I think that I can see overall where the intention for it is going, but I'm like, if I'm just somebody and I pick this up and I've got any clue, I'm gonna be asking questions that are gonna add a lot of time to the process.
Right.
And then if it has to come back to you guys and then you guys have to interpret and try to figure it out, it has to come to us and then it has to, now you've added a whole bunch of extra, or we've added a whole bunch of extra to the circle when really someone was just trying to change their
And,
troughs or
and
whatever.
really, this is first cut at this and there'll be
Yeah.
a lot of cleanup before.
Yeah,
this
yeah, I think
Run
it's,
through, right?
yeah.
I'm just throwing out some of the things I picked up.
Yeah.
And you want these sort of things that we find, you just bring them to you directly if that's be the fastest way to go through some of this stuff, like.
That is the fastest. If there are things where like you want feedback, we want to discuss it,
Yeah.
hash it out, but if you're just like, this seems weird, let's fix it.
Yeah, there was one, I'm not sure where it was, but it was on garages, and it was like, you can't be within 6 meters or whatever, I'm like, well, 6 meters, I mean, like. If you've got, like, lots are getting smaller these days, that's the width of your lot, I mean, how on earth is, you can't have a garage if it's within, you know, there was something, I can look it up again and find it for you exactly, but
Okay.
was like, this isn't,
So,
sorry.
no, that's not a problem at all. My next, question, well, it's not even a question. I think I know the answer, but, 202 agricultural operations extensive. You referenced confined feeding operations, which I know where they are, and I know they're regulated by a completely different body.
Yeah.
So it's a commercial agricultural operation other than a confined feeding operation, so you're making the assumption again. Everything but that.
Yeah.
So again, do you need a definition for this, or do you need to reference this as stated by such and such
Act, yeah,
act, right?
yeah, probably that.
Then we're gonna flip away for a few pages. Uh. 13, page 13 under landscaping. A lot of landscaping stuff. Other standard type of landscaping. Trees, grass, etc. There are some references to xeriscaping. Again, I'm not sure if we have definitions for that. But I can foresee in the future developments having more of that and less of the grass and trees.
Yeah.
Have we covered that option enough in this document? I'm just, general question. Not a specific, I just bring it up because it was mentioned under A there.
You mean covered off the possibility of?
Yes, and how we deal with that, you know, and again, that's gonna fall back to your tree thing in every yard.
Yeah.
The subdivision comes in and says, hey, we're gonna do a, you know, southern states type of landscape here in this subdivision, we're gonna have all rocks and different beds, do I still need a tree? You know,
So I guess the way the bylaw is drafted right now, every area that is not parking or some other type of space is required to be landscaped. By including xeriscaping in this, we are saying that that is a type of landscaping that we're willing to accept. The draft is requiring that 1 tree per lot, so if they wanted to do something completely different and not that, then that would be a variance. So they'd be coming.
It also allows them to come up with an alternative, right? Which would, they would still require the variance, you'd have to provide an alternative if we're gonna accept.
Yes, yes, yeah. Yes,
No, I was just thinking of what you're saying.
Is
I
the,
didn't put my hand up, I just went.
Oh, okay.
and one of the things I think that we bump into and people ask questions and again, I'm not in a position to give direction. So I try to say, well, it's all in the documents and they go, well, I'm not familiar with being able to read this. Like, I don't. And one of the first things that I tell people is like, well, you can get a variance for basically anything. That's why the mechanism is there. If you're applying for a variance to have your sewer pumped into your front yard, we're probably gonna say no. If you're applying to not have a tree there and you could justify a reason for it, there's probably gonna be a yes, but there's a process for that. And I don't know if there's enough emphasis, like people understanding. And maybe there should be something more involved in here where we can go, hey, listen, in big caps, like variances are available. Sort of thing. We don't want necessarily, you don't want to be hindered by like 100 of them on every single thing. And there's certain, I mean, Toronto charges $2,500 for one variance. Right? We don't want to go necessarily that way, but as like, are you really sure you want to do that? Might be, I don't know. It's just that there's some way to balance it where it's like people just think that this is the hard law. And I mean, this is I mean, it's the similar in aviation where we've got rules and regulations. But there's exemptions for literally everything. You just have to get the right thumbs up from the right person to be able to do whatever it is you want to do.
And I think typically that means being well aware of what you're allowed to do and having a good reason why you don't want to do it.
That's right.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, variances are there for that purpose exactly,
Yeah,
but that doesn't mean that you just ignore the document.
exactly.
Go straight to the variance and say, hey, I don't want to build a 4-foot fence.
Yeah.
I want an 8-foot fence here.
So, but I guess that's why this is in place, right? Like that would then come to us. We would all sit down and go, okay, well, no, we're not going to allow this variance because
Yeah,
this is the reason why.
and I think that this is kind of, I think, getting beyond the bylaw, but my hope is that as we have this new bylaw in place, and as we're working towards getting it in place, we're also working towards improving our processes, improving the information around it.
Right.
So breaking out something a little bit more around variances and what the process looks like and that sort of thing. I think-
People understanding that they can
Yeah.
get them.
Exactly, to kind of, I don't know that highlighting it, the information in the bylaw is what's needed, but highlighting that information somewhere that's
Yes.
easily digestible for
Yes.
someone who doesn't deal with this process every single day is a very good idea.
Go ahead, Doug. Just thinking as you're bringing it up, Terry, about, and you brought up the variants and stuff that are there. Again, lack of knowledge on my part. Do all requests for variances come with a cost?
Yes.
Yes.
Should they? And that's just a question.
Mhm.
Should they?
I would think so. I mean, this administration has to deal with it's another thing on someone's desk. If there was no cost associated, you mean like a cost from like,
I tend to agree with you,
right?
but I think there's a perception a lot of times of I pay X amount of time. I mean, let's go to this description. I'm not agreeing with it, but I paid all these taxes to have all this stuff and you're gonna nickel and dime me for every time I have a question.
I should actually clarify, sorry,
So-
because it's not actually true that every variance comes with a cost.
Oh,
Okay.
The way our fees have been working and the way we've been managing it, if it's a variance to a discretionary use where that use is already coming to the MPC for a decision, we have not doubled up the cost because the discretionary use permit fees,
It already has to be
it's,
looked at.
yeah, and so the discretionary use typically, well, it depends on the use, but a lot of them are 150. And then a variant supplement fee is 150. So, and it's basically you've got to take it to the MPC.
Yeah.
That's how it's worked.
Right.
Yeah, so, and as we update this bylaw, and we tweak the permit categories, we'll need to also take a look at the fee categories. And when we bring the fees and charges bylaw back to council, there will be an associated change. And then it will be up to council to decide if every variance gets has a cost or not.
right.
Yippee. No, it's fine, it was just, yeah.
There's lots of
I get
things
it,
that come out of it.
Is there a determined, like, we don't want frivolous or vexatious applications for variances, so when the fee is like, you're serious,
Yes.
you're willing to put a little bit of something into it as well as cover, you know, like, it's not only would it help to offset your administrative time, but make sure that people are not just, well, what the hell, let's see if I can skip the tree.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm gonna slide on a little farther along in the document, 224, again, it's just a clerical thing, but the front yard gives you that first sentence. Okay, is that Jerry? 224. Front yard. Portion of the
yeah.
side abutting is, the first sentence was just repeated.
Yeah, copy paste error.
Flipping over to 227 again, it's just kind of a typo thing. You got freestanding links on. At the top.
Mhm.
That kind of runs to the definition part, I think. For me. The rest of them seem fairly straightforward, so.
Well, that's not too many. But give me all your comments and. everything.
Yeah, like I say, I'll pass this on to you back to you and done with it.
Perfect.
That's more. One of the other things that I noticed in all your charts, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. Under your little charts, you've got the various categories. Visual, traffic noise,
Page.
any
What is
page
that?
that's got a chart.
Sorry,
It's every single district, if you'll find.
It's just one of these charts.
which page you're looking at?
I'm looking at
96, go to page 96, one of those charts in there.
the first one there, you've got visual appearance. I believe appearance is spelled wrong in every single one of your documents.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah, well, man. Okay, so
Sometimes
now
the
we've done
treat
that,
tables
we can get down
differently.
to the nuts and bolts of what we want to talk about.
Yeah. All right, I would suggest that we. Maybe we should, I think, let's look at the summary table. I think that's kind of in terms of the way this is organized and also the change or the impact on the MPC. So one other thing that I didn't mention that I will highlight is that discretionary use. Today, we have some discretionary uses where the decision-making power has been delegated to the development authority. So for some signs and things like that, we already have that. But this document goes a lot further. So we've got, and it's illustrated in the summary table, and then it's the same in the districts, but we've got permitted uses, decision-making authority of the development authority, discretionary uses, basically level one.
Where are you at?
Oh, sorry, I'm on page 21 right now, which is the beginning of the summary table.
Okay.
So all of the Ds you see on this table that do not have an asterisk next to them would be coming to administration for decision. We have the option, if we're not feeling comfortable, to punch it up to the MPC, but otherwise it's within our authority to make the decision. And then Ds that have the asterisk next to them would come to the MPC. The MPC is the decision-making authority. I am absolutely happy to have a sober second thought on where those things are split out. That was, it's a lot with all of these different uses, and I don't 100% know if we got it right in every single circumstance. So
So you want feedback on that?
I definitely want feedback on that. Yeah. So it's hard to do this quickly or go skip around, but for a residential use classes, the majority of them are decision-making at the discretion or at the discretion of the development officer. So you guys would barely ever see a residential use.
Does that mean, for example, a couple where we've had people want to have a 4-inch movement of a building kind of thing?
Well, so this doesn't include variances. So if someone is coming or
Okay.
wants to vary a rule, that is
Okay, it's
different.
okay, it's a
Yeah.
discretionary use of the function.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what about moving between like an R2 and an R6 or something like that? That's gonna come back to variance.
What do you mean moving between them?
Like, we'll say I wanna put a sixplex in instead of a duplex. Right now, that's a variance, would not be, or do I have to then change the land use?
You
On
have
that
to
specific-
apply for a land use bylaw.
Yeah, it depends on what your zoning is, whether you could put that sixplex in or whether, yeah.
So again, if you go back to your specific category, your residential, whatever it is. And you want to put a sixplex in there, you're gonna look at that, what that area is zoned at now.
Yeah,
And whether that's an allowed use.
yeah,
And if it's not an allowed use, it may be discretionary or it may not even be allowed.
that's right.
Yeah.
So if you go back to that category and you look in there, it'll have whether, a sixplex is discretionary or allowed or none of the above.
And if we look at, I mean, our sixplex would be a row house, townhouse.
Yeah.
So that is discretionary in the R1 and the R4 district and permitted in R2 and R3, permitted in CR. So,
I'm just wondering, the first thing that came to my mind when I was reading this, is like, why do we have so many R zones?
mhm.
I'm like, why, I mean, I understand there's certain areas, you don't, Shaftesbury wouldn't necessarily want to open that up to. Or Saddleback,
We actually, the way it's
Yeah.
structured now, and I'm gonna flip what we're looking at here.
yes, please.
But in terms of the residential districts, we've got R1 is covering the majority of what was R1 or R2 in the
Right.
town previously, which is most of our low density residential districts.
That's right.
R2, the new R2
Mhm.
is a skinnier lot. Subdivision, so I think it's 33 foot wide, but I actually can't remember right this moment. But part of the intention behind that is that in the CR district, so the one that covers all of downtown,
Mhm.
it points to to one of the residential districts. If you're dealing with the residential use in this area, and right now it's the R1A district, and that means that all of those lots in the downtown area that are smaller than 50 feet wide, they're all technically deficient.
Yeah,
So we've created a new district that one would allow a new developer to come in and do some smaller scale, more dense, single detached lots.
right,
And it also allows us to consider all of those smaller lots that exist in our community.
Mhm.
From back when it was originally subdivided in the early 1900s. Those are no longer legally existing, non-conforming, they're just legally existing.
right,
So we've added that district. Our R3 is our medium density.
Mhm.
R4 is high density. That's where most of our apartment sites would be districted R4. R5 is collapsed. We used to have a manufactured home subdivision, a manufactured home park district. So R5 is now a manufactured home district.
Right.
And then R6 is a district for lands that are not connected to municipal servicing, where we expect that the parcel size is probably bigger.
Mhm.
So that is what is covered Westbrook and some of the other small areas where we have a house, as well as this area, because we have an area structure plan here that allows for the development of large lot residential.
Right.
So that's our districts in a nutshell, and it
Yeah,
is much less than we have today.
right, yeah, no, it definitely is less, I was wondering why we still have so many, but it
If you
is better.
see opportunities for consolidation, please let me know.
I would
but-
I would just
Yeah.
open everything up, or like, I mean, understand you have to protect some R1, I understand that, right?
Mhm.
I mean, you can't have like an eightplex going up necessarily between right in the middle of Saddleback, I understand that.
Yeah.
But then it's like, okay, well, anything basically on this side of the river, in my opinion, which should be just like let it go. I mean, if it's gonna go, and you could just have it as a discretionary somehow too, would be my thought, is be like, hey, it has to come to MPC. And then we could all sit down and be like, I don't know, guys, if this, eightplex here, whatever this, 5-story, whatever, is gonna make sense between these two houses. And then we would, turn the developer down, he would throw mud at us and we move on. But at least then it's not. It seems like this, having so many and pigeonholing everybody, these developments can only do this. I mean, you've thought long and hard about this, but that's what I'm concerned about growth longer term.
Mhm.
Is, I mean, the hope is with this is that the town doesn't have to readdress this every couple of years. I mean, I imagine there's gonna be some adjustments as time goes on,
Mhm.
but you wanna try to last as long as possible. It's a lot of effort, it costs a lot to get done.
Yeah.
So, we're already there, right? So that was one of the things I thought. I was like, well, I mean, maybe we can add some, or maybe there isn't really anything we can do at this point, but if we could add more flexibility across those,
Mhm.
like say, some of the houses along the north end by the rec center and stuff like this, how say 3 in a row burned down. Well, without having to go and reapply and get that land all rezoned, if a developer bought all for them, make it easier for those people to do those sort of work
Mhm.
or get it done. I don't know, just my thoughts.
So
I could talk for.
I think
I
the
apologize.
I think the way I perceive it is those different zonings were done sort of, with a couple different purposes in mind. And one of them, like Alicia has mentioned, is to address some existing situations that we're trying to get off the books.
Yeah.
So that we're not dealing with them on a one-on-one basis.
Yeah.
The other one is, again, where do we want certain types of development, right? Your R1s and your single families, yeah, as opposed to your apartments and that sort of thing. You're right. Do we want them all mixed and stuck in?
Yeah.
Not necessarily, doesn't mean it can't happen.
That's right.
But these are the zones where we prefer them,
Okay,
or where right now they should be.
that's where we're kind
looked
of
at.
guiding
If
things.
you're gonna build a 50-story apartment building, these are the zones you should look at first.
Mhm.
If for
Not-
whatever
not-
reason,
Not in my backyard.
if for whatever reason that doesn't work,
Right,
then come on in and we can rezone as has happened, right?
if you're gonna put the effort in to get a rezone, then. if
Right,
you
there's
want
gotta
it,
be a
then-
reason.
Yeah.
This is, in the town planning mode, this is how we see our community developing.
Right.
Okay.
And we haven't gone so far as an 8-plex or a multi-story building everywhere, but consolidating the R1, we have added
Right, yes.
second or accessory dwelling units and semi-detached everywhere. So where today in most places that are districted R1,
Yeah.
you can have a single detached and you can't, that's it.
Yeah.
We have allowed
Open that up.
open that up to allow those things everywhere.
Yeah.
Because ultimately a house is a house.
Yeah.
And there's not necessarily a lot of structural difference between a house that has 2 dwellings and a house that has 1.
That's right.
So we have allowed for that incremental density increase everywhere.
Yeah.
Which also means it hopefully won't be concentrated all in one spot.
That's right.
So that the impact is spread over the community as well. But
Yeah.
so it's creating that.
No, it looks
opening.
really good.
Yeah.
It looks really good. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, this is all right in the right direction here. My one thought was like, is there a way to?
Make it go further.
Yeah, I mean, but,
Yeah.
and still have a way of catching, unwanted, you don't
Mhm.
want to, like I said, a 50-story tower right next
Yeah.
to someone's house is gonna go.
And I mean, like an apartment, in some of those, in our commercial area, that's allowed. So all of those residential areas within the downtown
Yeah.
are now,
That's right.
an apartment is a thing that is permitted. So, and might be today too. I'm starting to get confused between the bylaws, but
And there are other changes too. I mean, like BC just changed their, like, they can have single stairway
mhm,
units now, or so it's like up to like 8 stories now, either something like this, or 6 stories, and only have 1 staircase in them. Which means now you can have up to like 8 or 9 units or something like this on a single like 30 by 100-foot lot. So it's a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of caveat that comes with it. Like it's like you have to have, it has to be a concrete stairwell, there has to be like sprinklers throughout, there's a whole lot of other stuff there, but it does change density wise what could happen. So we just have to be. Anyways,
But they don't have space.
pardon?
They don't have space.
Well, it also just really impacts the economics of the development, how much of the square footage you can recoup in your,
Mhm.
and sell, what sellable area versus communal area that you need to provide for the structure of the building. Changes the economics of the development, making that change. So, yeah, we'll see if that extends beyond BC.
Yeah.
So, but,
Again, when I looked through this chart,
Mhm.
you know, I focused on the ones with your little stars on it, and because obviously those are the ones that we're gonna see.
Mhm.
And kind of went through the reasons as to why would those be in that particular area, why would that be a discretionary use?
Mhm.
And most of them luckily made sense to me, so.
that's good.
So I don't have a lot of questions actually about your chart. You know, again, I think what's gonna happen with these things is until somebody comes upon a situation
Mhm.
that says, oh, hey, I'm falling into a discretionary use here. Why is that? Or, you know.
Yeah.
And as long as the thinking behind your chart is defensible,
Mhm.
then you know, I can't see you running through and making a whole lot of changes to it. I didn't know any that really offended me, I guess, so. And that's not saying I know anything about every business that's ever gonna come along, but.
Yeah.
You know, the structure and the logic behind it, I think, is well done. And I think that these charts themselves are gonna make things so much easier for everybody, so.
Mhm.
Good job on taking that angle.
Thank you. But definitely, like, this is one where I do. I mean, and this is reflected in the district. So whenever we have a conversation with someone, like usually the issue is the use isn't listed where they want to do a thing.
Mhm.
For instance, we had a conversation this morning about a retail store in an industrial area. I don't know if anybody's been paying attention to Facebook, but that's a conversation that is likely coming in the very near future. And it's not a listed use in our current bylaw, and it's not proposed to be here, although I will note that that's one thing that is accidentally included, that I've already made a note. It wasn't an intentional thing. To allow retail in one industrial area, but those are the conversations we usually have. The issue isn't usually that when the use is listed, they might be a little bit annoyed that it has come to the MPC and it's going to take a little bit longer, but the real frustration comes when the bylaw doesn't allow them to do the thing that they're wanting to do at all.
Right.
So it is important for us to be feeling good about where we're enabling different uses. That's the main thing. Where are we allowing them at all, one way or the other? But and then who is the decision-making authority? Realistically, we always have the option to bring something to the MPC if we're not feeling comfortable. So we would do that. And I mean, personally, I think that if we ever contemplated refusing a use, often we'd probably decide to bring that forward. If that was our recommendation, we might bring that to the MPC rather than do it ourselves.
Just so you got more people on with a target on it.
So the community representatives have the opportunity to weigh in.
Encourage involvement.
Right.
One thing I did notice on this chart here, and maybe it's just because again, the definition of it.
Mhm.
So on those charts, you've got under solar energy, you've got for personal use, for commercial use. That is on page, 24.
Yep.
How does, you say have personal use there, but say it's a business.
Yeah, the language is confusing you a little bit. So commercial means like you're feeding into the grid. It's a commercial solar operation.
You're selling
Yeah.
power.
Yeah.
I
right.
understand that, but as per like most of those contracts, you
Yeah.
have to be selling to the grid, which means even residential ones,
Mhm.
technically a commercial application, because you are in a transaction with ATCO or
Right.
whoever it might be. And once your square footage on your roof, or you've got a roof as large as ours at the brewery,
Mhm.
there all of a sudden then you need to apply for certain other things provincially in order to get to that size.
Mhm.
So then they are gonna come to me and ask for me for commercial approval for a solar system that size, and if I'm not listed on that as a permitted use,
Mhm.
then we have to then go all the way back to square one. I haven't looked into this that far. I just
Yeah.
know that that could be a possibility if I, like, say we were gonna go do that, there might be a problem where, there's lots of roofs around town that are big and flat.
Mhm.
And if they want to put, at what point does it become commercial? What point does it, like, how are we justifying that? You just don't want people getting caught up in waiting for
Is it like what power you're generating would increase
So
the power you would use at like your most peak time?
if you look at the definitions, personal use means solar energy collection system intended for personal on-site use. A commercial means solar energy collection system that is designed exclusively to provide for the commercial distribution of electricity.
okay,
So,
Exclusive.
exclusive.
yeah, I think that
That there.
what
okay.
if you're putting solar on the brewery roof, you're providing yourself some power and then selling
Yeah,
access
it's
to the
intended
grid.
for just the use of the word
Yeah.
personal. I'm kind of
Yeah.
like, okay, well, I'm not operating as an individual.
Yeah,
Maybe we look at tweaking.
And if it's
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
under the commercial definition,
Yeah.
that's fine. I would understand that.
Mhm.
If I came to you and you told me that, I'd be like, hey, no, that sounds good. I'm
Yeah.
like,
What
off we
about
go.
on-site use?
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
That should work for everything.
that is the thing that came to my mind as well.
Like my house.
So, because then what happens, say if all the property changes hands, the new operation that moves into our building has sell, their retail instead.
Mhm.
Well, now they're producing however much energy on the roof and they're selling it at a profit.
Mhm.
Now we'll technically, are they gonna apply for, like, I mean, no one's gonna probably say anything unless, yeah, exactly, but if the intention is for on-site use.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Okay.
Something else.
But that's still a good clarification bit, like a language, let's make the bylaw as clear as possible. So if
Yeah.
that's raising a flag for you, then that's an opportunity to just make the language better.
And do we not want to open up more areas for live work development? I mean, I know like on the maps, it's very clear
Sorry, for which development?
for live work sites.
Mhm.
I mean, opening up some of the areas on the, like, I'm not sure how the application of the chart or the map was, like, how did you draw the boundaries? This goes here exactly, other than just historically, this, is that,
A lot of it is historical.
yeah,
But then there are circumstances where we know that there's something that's happening on site today
right,
that it didn't make sense.
Right.
Why was it this way instead of that way?
Right.
Example of that, will just illustrate, this is Fred's Heating,
yeah,
Community Development District today. Don't
right,
know why it's adjacent to the M1 or the industrial area. We're proposing to district it, the industrial area that's adjacent to it.
right,
So changes like that, but
Right.
it is a lot based on
Okay.
historic, primarily because unless we've got a good reason to, we don't want to radically alter the development rights of the property owner
right,
without
that's fair.
them asking for it or us doing it for a very strategic purpose.
That answers, yeah, that answers.
Yeah,
That makes.
but in terms of the live work unit, like what area of town would you advocate that use be included to? That where it's not right now.
I mean, most of anything around you go around the Ready Mart and stuff like that, I believe is zoned a little bit differently there.
Neighborhood commercial.
Yeah, so, I mean, that already falls into there.
Yeah.
So that's good. That was the first thing that came to my mind, is like, if someone's gonna redevelop something, I mean, or you're looking at, or even say parts around the ski hill there. I'm not sure what you've got that as right now, but that's another good example where it's like, hey, listen, if we wanna. Yeah, so I mean, there's room for it there, in my opinion. So. Oh. You got a recreational area, lots of people coming to, visiting,
Mhm.
and there's no services there beyond, not to say that, I don't know, I would just think it'd be. Yeah, be an opportunity to encourage development beyond just. I mean, there's a lot of people living from there all the way down to the end of the south end of Shaftesbury,
Yeah,
and there's nothing.
there is, within this area, there's an area structure plan, and if they were to follow it, then there would be opportunities for commercial in here.
Right.
Yeah.
Like you said, though, and previously, like, you don't want to just go and change stuff for the people that are already there. I
Yeah.
understand, that answers most of the questions that I was gonna come and start poking at this thing.
Yeah.
So that kind of took a lot of the air out of that, so that's fine, but
Okay.
just as one, I was like, hey, that's really awesome, they're putting that in there.
Mhm.
You know, having traveled recently and, you know, seeing as much as it applied where elsewhere, it's like, okay, well, we should have a little bit more of this, because it would definitely help walkability and stuff of our neighborhoods as well,
Mhm.
our neighborhood as well. That said, it has to be, because our population's so small, a little bit more. Yeah, okay. Anyways, I'm done. Sorry.
Okay, anything else on the chart? Everybody's feeling? When you look at the industrial uses in particular, because those are ones that would probably have the most nuisance factor. Any questions, thoughts around that?
Exactly, you got the M2,
So M1 is on this side of the river.
right?
M2 is the majority of the industrial lands that are on the west side. And then M3 is primarily just the rural concrete area, which is the only spot where natural resource extraction is a listed use allowed at all. And that's where their gravel operation is. Okay, so maybe just going through some of the details of the overlays. I do want to, and this is one thing we highlighted in the survey, so you might already be aware of it, but in the Main Street overlay today, there is a minimum height requirement of 2 stories. So anybody wanting to build a new building on Main Street would have to do 2 stories, and we have had a few conversations, so we're changing it, propose to change it to
Minimum 3.
Yeah. I mean, we would all prefer more stories along Main Street, but right now, the proposal in the bylaw is to drop the requirement to a 1.5 story facade. So we're at least getting some visual elevation to provide a better streetscape, but not mandating the second floor. I'm hoping that we get to a point where we are incentivizing a second floor, but we're lowering the requirement. So that is a strategic change, for better or for worse,
Yeah,
is arguable in this case.
It's almost, is that too early? To make that change? I mean, considering, oh, maybe if some big, huge announcement happens in the near future,
Mm.
you know, incentivizing people to start building, and then like, oh, but right when we did this reduction in the requirement.
all the
people-
lots on Main Street were taken by, you know,
Mhm.
Has there been an instance that you could think of in the last 10 or 15 years where someone was like, you know, I was gonna do something, but because of this, I'm not?
I don't know how serious it was.
Yeah.
There is one inquiry that I can think of where the second floor requirement did come into play.
Okay.
Whether, if that had been removed, would they have actually proceeded? I wouldn't want to commit to a yes with that, but.
but again, it comes back to what we were talking about earlier. I mean, if they really needed to do that, put that second or reduce it, they could have gone through the processes to get it changed, so that reduction was there. So, I mean, if they really wanted it that badly,
Mhm.
the mechanism was in place for them to be able to do it.
Yeah.
So we don't need to change it. We do.
You guys have talked about this before.
No,
No,
no, we haven't.
No, actually.
Yeah. So. I don't know if there's any other opinions around that. Okay. All right, I'm skipping on to the R1. I do want to highlight a couple of other changes in here, specifically related to the site requirements. So today our front yard setback is 7.62 meters. So this does propose to drop it to 6.1. So we're allowing everybody to get a little bit closer to the street, gives more buildable space within each lot, which facilitates a garden suite, for example, on the lot as well. And it isn't, if you're doing an infill lot, it's not a massive change in terms of the streetscape, but it does give a little more space. And 6.1 is basically the smallest that we would recommend if you're gonna have any sort of parking in the front yard, because a parking space needs to be at least that depth.
Would it alter, so I'm looking down the street and I see the fronts of the houses all in very similar, except for that one empty lot. And so we built on there in 2025 after this passed, and that house is sticking out.
Yes.
How much difference?
1.5 meters. What, 7.62 down to 6.1, so.
Don't worry about it, there'll be a tree in front of it. You won't-
Byron, drive down 92nd Street in Lower West Peace and decide if my house offends you, because it's deficient right now.
Or mine.
Yeah,
and what if someone applies to put a porch or something on too, right? And now all of a sudden now it's like a couple meters out beyond.
We don't have like
we don't have a lot of
cookie
uniform
cutter
neighborhoods.
type streets.
Yeah,
Here,
not
like,
many.
we don't have that type of suburban sprawl type, development that you find in a neighborhood in Calgary or whatever, right? So
I think our community is fairly forgivable, or like, everyone's.
we do have like, we're consistently inconsistent in, and not horribly, but just.
Yeah,
Not
in a
that
lot of
way.
ways.
That it wouldn't stand out, and there's no neighborhood that I'm trying to think, is there a neighborhood to be like, oh, that's not right.
I think the one that would the most is the street next to TA. That is a like historically,
Oh, yeah.
I forget. Pardon? Oh, Don Street, yeah,
86th Avenue,
yeah.
And
Where-
there's lots of trees.
and what do you think,
We're
Oh,
just
just-
talking about the front yard setback change. So somebody redeveloped a lot on that street and
Move the house
move
forward.
the house forward, then that would potentially stick out and be quite noticeable. That being said, 7.62 is the minimum. There are houses in Peace River who are set back further than that, and their front yard is larger, so,
Yeah,
and there's nothing forcing you to be at that line.
Would that be a difference with like having a boulevard sidewalk like on that street versus a monolithic? Where is it measured from?
yeah.
The property line. So if you've got a boulevard, then
You
you've
have
got that
left
front yard and then the boulevard in front as well.
But there's not a lot of properties where you'd be having a front, a boulevard and parking in your front either. Is there?
There is more West Piece.
Well, I guess in Don Street there too, I guess.
But no one has parking.
No, that street doesn't have a lot of parking in the front yard.
That's right.
where,
Your street.
Is there something?
there's, 1, 2, 3, probably 5 homes there that have parking at the front of the house or to the side, but effectively to the front.
Right.
There's they don't go to the backyard
Mhm.
or they don't go to the back wall. They park, their cars parked just off the street.
But
So-
there's nothing here that would like potentially spoil the ambiance of that street.
No, and that doesn't really affect anything there for the most part.
All right, I'm happy. Yeah, thank you.
And then there's also a change to the site coverage maximum. So today it's 35%. This provides for 55. Again, so that you can have more buildable space. Yeah. I think there's anything else major that I want to highlight in the districts themselves. Harry, do you have any, when you're going through the districts, anything you want to discuss?
Well, I got a few, yeah, I got lots of little stickies sticking off the side here.
Save the typos, but anything that's a
Yeah.
bigger discussion.
So, again, your setbacks, and I'm
Page number?
just at 35, for instance. Most of these setbacks and stuff that were transferred into these charts that you've got for the various, you know, our run districts, et cetera, are existing, right?
Yes.
Other than, you know, a couple that you mentioned there every year.
Mhm.
So. The majority of this stuff is no change to what we already have, it's just putting it into this chart, basically.
For the most part, yes.
Was there,
And putting it into meters.
Yes,
Yes.
which threw me off entirely, thank you.
It's a transition for us all. But it is the standard moving forward, so.
was there any other, oh, sorry,
Actually, so there's one other thing I wanted to highlight related to the residential and the accessory dwelling units. So I don't know if anybody's noticed at the bottom of this chart in terms of density. So the way it's worded right now is the maximum number of dwelling units on a lot not abutting a functional rear lane is 1. So you can have a garden suite or a secondary suite. You have a functioning rear lane, you could have 2. So you could have a secondary suite and a garden suite.
You have a which, I'm sorry?
A secondary suite and a garden suite. So you could end up with 3 dwelling units on one lot in the areas where there is a functioning lane. So we have access to the property from 2 sides.
You got your garage at the back, you can put a suite above the garage, plus you can put another little, another suite separate.
Yeah, so
You could become a small.
Darn, he was so rich.
No.
if you also have the space within the lot to do those things and meet all the other requirements,
Yeah.
but including the parking. There aren't that many areas of town where there's, if you actually start looking, there's lots of areas where there are not functional rear lanes or there's no rear lane at all.
Yeah.
You know, the majority of Saddleback, this would not apply. The majority of the north end, it would not apply. There's a couple blocks where it would. Laurel West Piece has lanes on most of it, but one, like the stuff that's near the cliff on 91st Street does not.
Yeah, it's pretty.
That sort of development doesn't really
Yeah,
lend
Shaftesbury,
itself conducively to adding additional density of either, unfortunately, just because you've only usually got 1 or 2 accesses into the entire neighborhood, and you have everyone trying to leave a neighborhood like that at 5 o'clock, or should get into it at 5 o'clock, or leave it at, 7 in the morning. It's, you've doubled the density of traffic coming in and out of there, and everyone has to drive because it's in the middle of nowhere, and there's no.
That's why traffic is a big item in your little chart that you have to tick off.
Yeah.
You've addressed that.
But so it is still, when we get to, if anybody wants to take advantage of that and has three dwellings on a parcel, that's not an insubstantial change.
Right.
For a community like the service. And I just wanted to bring it forward and make sure that that wasn't a surprise for anybody.
I do have a question under, your development regulations on residential district R5, and then your note on page 52.
Okay.
The manufactured home park is required to. And under your B, there, devote 5% of the gross site area to landscape open space, and open space shall contain playground equipment. You better define what you're accepting as playground equipment. Like I could put a sandbox there and say I'm good.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yep.
That's way to marry them out.
And I'm assuming it has to be
One of those
safety
ones that make you
standard
really
approved,
nauseous,
right?
just
Yeah.
one of those, right?
Yeah,
That's right. The old drum style too, where you climb into it.
Okay, there was one thing here, on, residential district R6. Under your discretionary uses, you've got residential use class communal living, dwelling semi-detached. And then when you go over to your chart,
Mhm.
you've got communal living, dwelling manufactured home and dwelling semi-detached.
Thank you.
So your manufactured home is not in your original. What, either you put it into the one or you take it out of the other.
Yeah, we're taking it out of the chart. The intention purposefully in this bylaw, we're not trying to change how we're dealing with manufactured homes. That has the potential to be a controversial
Yeah.
discussion, so not addressing it right now. We're actually starting a housing project with the Rural Development Network, and that is one of the questions that we're asking. It's more of a high-level policy document. Once that is done, then we might bring a bylaw amendment forward that deals with that more specifically.
So that's gonna come out of the chart then.
Yes, it would come out of the chart. That's an unintentional. There was a bit of confusion between me and the
Yeah, I
contractor
saw
about how we were
another one
treating that.
you, put, I think, commercial use class, was that just scratching your head on page 34?
Sorry, in the R6.
No, I run back to your R1. On page 34, R1, under discretionary use, the
Nope.
second.
Sorry, Terry, I need you to not move on yet because I'm still confused about
sorry.
the change or the issue that you flagged. What is it?
That was in,
Manufactured home was listed in R6 on the chart or in the,
it is listed on the chart on page 54, dwelling manufactured home.
oh, it's in the, okay,
It's in
sorry,
the
now I know
chart, but it's
which
not
chart
in
you're
the-
referring to.
Not in the
Yeah.
residential class discretionary use list.
Okay, thank you. I followed, I found it. We'll fix it. So, okay, you moved on back to R1?
Yes.
Okay.
Page 34. On your commercial use classes, you think that should fall into the commercial use class? You were debating with yourself?
Thanks. Yeah, that's a very obvious typo. Somehow we copied over a comment into
I
that.
assume that's
Yeah.
what it was.
Thank you. This is a draft.
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
We were on page 52 is some kind of stuff for me where we were talking about the manufactured home park requirements, and it talks about lighting and road quality and whatever to the satisfaction of the developmental authority and the town engineer.
Mhm.
Is that a standard that's quite like malleable or not? So for example, if your town engineer, like they would have professional requirements that they would follow. So when you reference the town engineer, it's not just because Pat's feeling, happy that day, so he's gonna let it go.
Yeah,
Or there's some standard that he will follow, idea that's just doesn't jump out to,
There are,
the average guy like me.
there are set criteria for road development, for instance.
So that
It
will,
has to be a
that-
standard.
so the fact that that is stated there means something really important somewhere, just that I'm not thinking like, oh, so if I can make the town engineer like me more,
That might help,
I'm sure it might, but it shouldn't.
but he still has to follow those design standards
Yeah,
that are adopted by the town. So the town has adopted design standards for,
like I'm thinking of the road that connects, like Saddleback to Westbrook Estates, and it's
Yes.
quite a silly road.
yes.
Is
Silly,
town engineer
fun.
feeling good that day? Yeah, sure, what the hell?
yeah.
Why it's all wiggly on top.
Well, just, you know what I mean, like, somewhere is there a document that says this isn't really what we should be doing, and then whoever the engineer is would be like, this is the standard.
Yeah, so I can't remember, or we have general municipal servicing standards.
Okay,
Those are about municipal infrastructure. The differences in this circumstance, we're not talking about municipal infrastructure, we're talking about what we would accept on private land, that's
Right.
gonna stay private land.
okay,
So we might accept a lesser standard,
Because it's not gonna be hauling stuff.
but it still needs to be a minimum standard that's functional for the site.
Steel also has to meet other regulations, such as transportation regulations or whatever. You know, when you're doing your development, you're gonna be looking at a transportation study, and they're gonna tell you that.
Right,
You know, is that you're bringing your road network into ours. Yours has to be at least this.
But if you think about the internal road system in the Cheviot,
that's what I'm thinking about.
manufactured home park, that is a decent road, but it's not to the same standard as the municipal roads that are leading into it.
Okay.
So there is a difference.
Yeah, we're just not gonna get like a, gravel park.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
So I made myself a note,
Yeah,
to double check if we should be referring to the general municipal servicing standards, or if there's something else that we should be referring to here rather than this language.
Just a question on the definitions of dwelling group care and supportive housing.
Okay.
If you fit the supportive housing, are the definitions really clear as to,
The difference?
to the difference? Because the one says, well, the second one, supportive, says, well, persons that require additional care, and the group care is additional care
Mhm.
in the term. I know it does include that it talks about halfway houses, et cetera, and things like that. And it's not, for example, R1 allows supportive housing, but it doesn't allow dwelling group care. Am I correct? As a permitted use.
Yes, I think you are
It's
correct.
discretionary, am I correct?
Yeah, yep, you are correct.
Okay. So
but it is still
probably,
in your discretion.
it's probably fine, but you might want to put in group care excluding.
Well, I
Or
think if you go
probably
into those
supportive
definitions, though,
housing,
there's
right?
more in the definition that defines each of those terms other than degree of care required. I think.
Right, there is.
So I think it's the other factors, Don, that impact whether it's discretionary or not.
Right. Yeah,
But I guess the point that I'm taking is that we need to make sure that the difference between the two is clear.
and maybe put even in the supportive housing does
Mhm.
not include.
Yeah.
Does not include dwelling group care. And to really specify, just to really clarify that if you're there, you're not here, and you can't sort of go for wiggle room on it.
Mhm.
No, it's still a discretionary use, so you can, have at her on that count, but.
But then you're not floating back and forth between the two.
Mhm.
Once the,
Yeah, we're trying to muddy the water.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I have another question. I am on page 82 now. This is the development regulations for industrial district M1.
Okay.
And down at the bottom under storage areas, you got you got two A's to start with. but
Mhm.
Other than that, the second one says outside display storage areas should be kept in a clean and tidy appearance to the satisfaction of the development authority. Now, when you say it shall be kept, that implies ongoing. So does that also imply that you're gonna go out there and inspect it? Or you're only gonna deal with it if you get a complaint?
Typically municipal enforcement is complaint driven
Right,
unless we're doing a specific strategic initiative. So I'm
right, so
Okay,
the answer is no, we're not gonna
82.
have our guy go out there and just check and make sure that things are kept. Clean and tidy appearance to the satisfaction of the development authority.
Mhm.
You tell them what they have to do when they do it, they develop it.
Mhm.
But according to this, they have to maintain that,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
That's the intent.
and the unsightly premises bylaw or whatever would apply.
It would.
Well, I'm sure, and there's probably other things that are looked at by the bylaw officer as well. It's just that the wording there to me implies that it's gonna be followed up.
Mhm.
And if we don't intend to follow up on it, unless somebody complains, do we still need it, or is that?
Is there post? Like, cause you had
That goes-
mentioned, like,
yep.
once you've issued the development permit.
Yeah.
Is there post permit enforcement possible with this document?
Yes.
And that falls back into the landscaping part too, when I was reading through that on what they have to do and what they have to post as a bond. And the timelines I was confused with, because in one place they said it's gotta be maintained for in good working for 2 years.
Mhm.
And yet your bond can be returned after a year. So if it's returned after a year and the thing goes to crap. I mean, I think. we
Without the
should-
bond, we don't
You
have.
should
a
look
lot.
at those again.
Okay.
Just your timelines, because I think it was kind of contradictory there in a couple places, and I.
Okay.
Flagged it here, but.
Don't think she wanted you to read it this carefully.
Yes, I did. Yeah, no, I definitely appreciate the attention.
Are you open for new discussion topics, or are we still, I don't
I'll
want to
go
interrupt
ahead.
Terry's flow?
Go ahead.
We had discussed about the sea cans.
Mhm.
And I was wondering if we could kind of highlight that, because I'm interested in the opinions around the table of that change.
Awesome. Yep. Let's go to page. It will be under accessory building or structure, so that's 121.
And this is something that Andrew and I were discussing just the other day, because he did the survey as well, and it sparked a conversation between the two of us, so it's happening, Alicia.
Perfect.
Things are happening, people are talking. Even if they are boring old married couples.
Okay, so storage containers. So today we allow storage containers in industrial areas. There are storage containers in many commercial areas. They are not necessarily there legally. We have not done a lot of enforcement. And we have flagged this as something to consider as a change before we go to a lot of enforcement. Because to my knowledge, there hasn't been a lot of complaints in some circumstances. Still not allowed in residential under this bylaw, but we are allowing that shipping containers are allowed to be placed on commercial, public use, industrial, or future development lots. We're setting a maximum of 2 shipping containers in the C1 primary commercial, the riverfront development district, and the commercial residential. So basically downtown, if you're dealing with a commercial property, there's a maximum of 2. They're not allowed in the front yard or between the principal building and the street. So there's restrictions on where they can be placed on those properties, but they can be placed. And then we do have requirements around the exterior finish of the shipping, or allowing us some discretion to set some requirements for that. So that's kind of the crux of what you were debating, right?
Yeah.
Give me an example of what is in that.
So like if I were walking along, for example, the dike pathway behind Remax area, they could stick a shipping container back there and I'd have to look at it when I'm walking along the river. But it would have to look nice.
Yeah.
What's the where was that, the sentence, which clause is it?
H, the exterior finish of a shipping container sited within a commercial district must be consistent with or complementary to the finish of the principal building.
So you can't have a brick building and a metal, like they have to like kind of facade it?
You could say it's complementary. I think we're mostly looking at color and quality of the, like,
So it can't be
We're
all
not-
rusty.
yeah.
Okay.
At least that's how I would choose to interpret that. I wouldn't expect them to put a facade. Maybe we want to get more specific in our language in the bylaw to make that clear.
I'll point out here on the storage containers, you've got on B,
Mhm.
it cites, another number
Oh,
below.
mhm.
But you can already see. It says 8.1.24, but there is no 8.1.24. There's.
And I found that in a couple other places, too, where they referenced certain things and they weren't.
There weren't the right
I went there
reference.
and it's totally unrelated, so
Okay.
obviously a typo, but.
Mhm.
I think that's just, it should be just 3.
Yeah, it should be 23, not G.
So I can think of a commercial shipping container in, I'm not gonna, because we are in public. I'm not gonna point a finger, but that it does not complement, it quite stands out. Once you see it, you can't unsee it, you know, sort of idea. So would there be, if this bylaw were to come into effect as written, would there be an opportunity for someone to go to that, say, place and say like, you love to keep this here now, however, we would like this to happen?
Mhm.
Or is it like, it's there, they got away with it, what are you gonna do?
The rules have changed since, do we grandfather them in, is what you're asking?
You,
How do we,
you don't, there's no grandfather status for something that isn't permitted. If you
Okay.
received a permit for a thing, then
Right.
it is legally existing. If you
Right.
haven't received a permit for it, then
Okay.
that's not.
And right now they're not allowed.
Pardon?
And right now they are not allowed.
Right now, they're not allowed, right?
So it's
Right.
non-conforming already. Literally, you could walk in there and say,
gotta go.
So are we saying that in R1, there will be no shipping containers effectively?
In the residential, the bylaw today and the draft bylaw do not allow shipping containers for storage purposes, except for temporarily related to a construction project.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. It's more a question of, do we agree with the change to the commercial areas?
Well, I'm just thinking of a person who has like in-laws, like secondary residence on the back, right?
Mhm.
And they want to have a place for, let's say, a tiny home, for example, but they would like to have some storage for the person living in the tiny home.
Mhm.
Not to build a shed, a conforming shed.
I guess that's true.
Yeah,
They have
it'd be
that
a different
option.
type of structure.
Okay. There's an option there, a reasonable one.
But if they wanted to build a garden suite that was a shipping container garden suite, that is acceptable. We're talking about shipping containers for storage. If you want to make use of that structure for a different type of,
Oh, to build a tiny home out of a shipping.
yeah,
Okay.
that would be
Yeah,
okay. You'd have to meet building code. It would,
right.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good.
2 seems like a lot. Like
Yeah.
to me, 1 shipping container in the downtown per commercial space is.
Mhm.
2 is like, bro. Get a bigger building.
how many places have room for 2? In the downtown
yeah.
area.
In the downtown, there wouldn't be a ton.
Yeah,
They also have to,
us and the 2 others. Cause I mean, my concern is like, okay, you're allowed to be here because you've got the parking thing and now you're just gonna fill up your parking with shipping containers and
Mhm.
then you're kind of,
Yeah, like you said, give
2 seems like a lot. 2, that's just my thinking. 2 seems like a lot. In the C1, is that we're talking C1 or downtown?
basically all of downtown.
Yeah.
If you don't want to see gross, don't go down the alley north of River Drive Mall. Terrible mess there all the time.
Yeah, that's more of that's a dumpster issue, not a shipping container issue.
Yeah.
But it is an issue for
Talking
sure.
about messes though.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Are we gonna wrap at 6 or are we
More
carrying on?
feels-
And
One, I
Feels
think
better?
one feels better.
Alicia,
I know,
Sorry.
are we gonna wrap up at 6? Because if we are not, I have to make a phone call and tell somebody I can't be at it someplace else.
I leave it to the MPC's discretion.
So
Who asked if we're having?
We can schedule a second meeting and continue this conversation at a different date. Or not, it's up to you guys.
Well, I'll be honest with you, I've heard a lot of things that are really good for information today.
Mhm.
That seriously.
I
Terry,
think
you
there's a
guys-
lot of things we still need to
Giving
touch
you
on,
credit,
is my
there's a lot of
point, and I don't think in the
conversations
next
worth
10
it.
minutes or so, we're gonna touch on them, so
Well,
my suggestion would be we reschedule another
Mhm.
meeting.
what this will also kind of introduce is like with more things being under the authority of Alicia and her crew and less under the MPC, that also allows other purposes for the MPC to kind of take the fore, such as what we're doing now.
Yes.
And this is good practice for that.
I've got to thank you guys for the work you've done on this so far. Awesome. Appreciate it.
Thank you, and thank you all
Well, you
for
guys
actually in like reading it and have to give good feedback, because it is a brick of a document, yeah. No
A
denying it.
2-hour meeting does feel like just scratching.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we can
So,
reschedule another meeting.
I would suggest sooner than later, so that we don't lose
Momentum and
where we're
focus.
going.
Yeah.
We may see some different people here, which they may have some of the same questions.
Mhm.
But yeah, if we can reschedule, I
Okay.
would appreciate that.
That sounds
I gotta
good.
go through the bean bags at the farm hall.
Yeah, I gotta supervise some beanbag throwing. There's like 1 week in March that doesn't work for me. It's pretty much
Which week is that for
the
you?
RMA week and the weekend. You're probably at Asha for at some point at the end of March.
Can we do another one this week even? Like, is it against just to be all roll in again in a couple days or something?
Like Thursday?
Yeah, or something like that. Does that work for you?
My suggestion is that we let Alicia pick a date, and I personally don't care what date it is of the
Yeah.
week, whether it's a Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, whether it's at 4 o'clock or even in the evening, doesn't matter, you know, when can you get a group of people together
Wednesday,
that
the
wanna talk
first,
about it?
Wednesday, the first week of March doesn't work for me. Other than that,
What are they usually?
Huh? Pick some
Oh, yeah.
dates, send it out and give us a couple,
That's-
3
I like
options
that.
and.
Yeah, 2 or 3 or 4
And,
options.
I mean, we can tentatively schedule more than one meeting and just kind of steadily go through it and continue this conversation through the month of March.
Mhm.
But I'll try and put them sooner rather than later so that we can keep the momentum up.
Yeah. And help get this review or, but can we post it, note the shipping container? Cause I also think I wanna talk about the finish on the shipping containers as well before we're done. Maybe
Okay.
more than just paint.
Okay, so we are still in, meeting,
Yes.
and we still have some agenda items on here.
Sure.
There's reports and information, which is the next one.
Yeah.
Which is again, it's an information for us, just basically lets us know what's going on. I'm gonna, again, just kind of ask that we don't ask any questions about this right now. And we'll bring it forward to the next meeting. No other business. So in that case, I will call adjournment at whatever time it is, 6:05,
6:03.
6:03, okay?
Okay, thank you all. And yes, meetings forthcoming soon.
What's back to those typos. I drafted the odd document in my life, and when I read it, I read what's supposed to be there, not what.
Yeah, your mind fixes it for you.
Yeah, so, you should we all